I'm actually going to have a drink.
We're going to get us started. We have some more chairs here. Given the number of people we have this evening, we're also setting up an overflow space upstairs. Our staff can, anyone who's not giving public comment, if you want to be slightly more comfortable seated environment, we have seats upstairs as well. So our staff are out there if you want to, and we'll probably have to direct people there as they come in. All right, so good evening. I'm Rick Cruz, chair of the DC Public Charter School Board, and welcome to our first monthly board meeting of 2019. I'm joined this evening by several of my board members, Steve Bumbau on my right, Naomi Shelton, our vice chair, Saba Beretta, Leah Cruci, and our executive director, Scott Pearson. Don Seufer is participating by telephone. Don, can you confirm that you're there?
I'm here.
Excellent. And then our seventh board member, Ricardo Ganjam, is unfortunately sick, but I have a set of proxy votes for her with me for today's public meeting. So by any measure, there's been a lot of activity in the public charter sector in January already that impacts public charter schools, students, and their families. Last Tuesday, we voted to close National Collegiate Prep Public Charter School at the end of the 1920 school year. There's been some confusion about when the school will close, so I wanted to reiterate that National Collegiate Prep will be closing after the last day of the 1920 academic year, so not June of 2019, but June of 2020. And we have executed a signed charter amendment with the school. For those of you who follow the actions of this board, it's rather unusual for us to give a school an extra year when we find that it should close, but it was a direct response to much of the testimony and our engagement with the school community, the families, regarding student safety and student stability. As we said last week during the special meeting that we had around the vote, it's never easy to close a school. It's not easy on the students, families, the community, or our staff who work very closely with so many of our schools. However, again, the precedent that we've set as a board is that we're very clear. Our goal is to ensure that every student in a public charter school in the city gets a quality education, and when a school gets a charter, it makes certain promises, sets certain standards for what it achieves, for what it is meant to achieve, and we hold them to it. If it fails to meet those standards, as was the case with National Collegiate, then we see it as our duty and responsibility to close the school. We're obviously obviously unfortunate that we were that the school was unable to give its students a quality education, and as you saw, for anyone who was watching last week, we struggled and wished that we had a different choice. But we felt that the students there deserved a first-rate education, and they weren't getting that. So we've got for all the families who are affected, we've got our staff to support them, and we're working closely with the school on the plan for the next 16 to 18 months. Over the last week, we also learned that Chavez Schools is planning to close 2 campuses and operate a high school at 1 location. The school's proposal to amend its charter is currently open for public comment. It's on our website, and we're going to have a public hearing next month. I know there are several individuals that I'm imagining are going to speak perhaps to some related issues today, and then that is teed up for vote in March. Also across the last week, the issues of physical safety, mental health, mental and emotional safety for students has been brought to the fore. Unfortunately, I think we as a overall education ecosystem are still struggling to meet the goals of making sure that our students are both physically, emotionally, and mentally safe. And we've learned about a number of violent actions involving students. And as a community, I think we have much more to do. Last week, the news reported on 4 students at 3 public charter schools who were involved in violent conflicts. And last week, it was also the very unfortunate 1-year anniversary of a suicide at Seed Public Charter School. So we communicate with city officials about this on a regular basis, but we are committed to continuing to work closely with our colleagues at other agencies to continue to develop new approaches and implement the approaches that we've been working on more diligently across the next few years. So there's a lot has happened, some of which we'll touch upon today. As with all of our meetings, we have 2 portions. We've got a public hearing section where we've got a couple of issues that we're opening for public comment. And then we will transition into the public meeting where we have a number of items that we are going to be voting on. So we've got a number of people signed up to speak this evening. So I want to start with inviting 3 people at a time that have public comment about 3 items that we're opening for public hearing this evening: Capital City Public Charter School, Early Childhood Academy Public Charter School, and the DC PCSB School Transparency Policy. So those are the 3 public hearing items tonight. Anyone who has public comment to offer on the items we are voting on later, if I'd ask you to reserve that public comment for that section in a couple of hours. So I'm going to start with the first 3 people signed up for public testimony. We've got a lot of people that want to deliver comments this evening, so I just want to remind everyone to limit their comments to 2 minutes. There'll be a timer in front of you. We'll count down. We'll turn yellow when you have 30 seconds left. And many of you, I'm sure, will have longer comments to offer. I want to make sure that you take advantage of submitting written comment or leaving comment with any members of our staff. If you want to submit online, it is publiccomment@dcpcsb.org. That's publiccomment@dcpcsb.org. We also have a number of representatives from our communication team here today, should you want to leave public comment with us or with them. So, to start off our public comment, we've got, I'll just go straight from the top here, Laura Fuchs, David Koenig, and Christian Hare.
Hello, I'm Laura Fuchs, and I'm a teacher in DC Public Schools and a Ward 5 resident for the past 12 years in DC. In order for the public to be able to make informed decisions about education in this city, we need access to data. The purpose of the Public Charter School Board is to help make data accessible to decision makers, not just parents. With the proposed changes to only house data at the local school websites, it appears to me that it will be more difficult for decision makers to find and access the data, even if the data is more up to date. The Public Charter School Board should be collecting and publishing this data, as well as having schools put the most up-to-date information on their website for their families, and I hope that's what's going to be done. Accessible and transparent data is also the key ingredient for effective oversight. There are a few areas that are missing from the current policy proposal that should be included to make sure that oversight is effective and parents have all the information they need. The first should be total budget transparency. The public and parents in particular have a right to know how money is being brought in and how it is being spent in their student's school. Second, with Charter School Board of Trustees meetings calendar, they should also include the minutes from those meetings so that parents know what is being discussed and have an opportunity to weigh in on those important matters. Third, the credit recovery options policy and that schools use should be completely transparent alongside the course offerings and graduation requirements. If the goal is to improve transparency, then we cannot end without discussing having LEAs be accessible to FOIA and the Open Meetings Act. This already is the case for DC Public Schools, and it is DCPS Central Office's job to help our school comply when there is submitted a FOIA request. This should be the job of the Public Charter School Board. If a FOIA request is made of a specific LEA, then PCSB should help the LEA complete the request. If a school is receiving government funds, it should be subject to the same laws as other schools. This is standard practice in most jurisdictions around the country, and parents and the taxpaying public have a right to the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Christian Herr, and I'm a teacher and union member at Chavez Prep. I'm here to speak in response to this board's proposed transparency policy. Our school worked hard to meet the conditions that this board laid out for us last year in order to retain our charter, and we more than surpassed them. Our students, their families, and our school-based staff did what was asked of us, only to have our school taken from us anyway by the board of Chavez Schools. If this board thinks the 10 Square and the Chavez board handled this situation appropriately, then I would challenge the fitness of its members to occupy the seats they sit in tonight. If this board recognizes, however, that the fates of publicly funded educational services for our most vulnerable families should not be decided in closed-door meetings by board members who haven't set foot in a school in years, then it needs to throw its proposed transparency policy in the garbage where it belongs and start demanding actual accountability from the over 700 people who sit on charter school boards citywide. According to its vision statement, this board aims to, quote, serve as a national role model for charter school authorizing and accountability, end quote. How can it claim that when it allows its charter holders to operate in the shadows? I'm sure this board believes that measures such as the PMF promote school accountability, and they do in a way. But if a school closes, on whom do those consequences fall the hardest? Do they fall on for-profit charter management organizations like 10 Square, who simply lose a line in their portfolio? Do they fall on board members who simply lose a line on a crowded resume? It's a travesty that those who bear the most responsibility for the success of a school and those who suffer the hardest when it closes are those whose voices this board has repeatedly sought to silence and ignore. If this board seeks to live up to the task it has been charged with, it will require every organization under its direction to fully open up its board meetings, be fully subject to Freedom of Information Act requests, and make public a far broader array of information than this pathetic proposed policy requires.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Koenig, and I'm a teacher at Washington Latin Public Charter School. Let me first just say a word about the transparency policy that is at issue this evening. Labeling this a transparency policy is a bit misleading, as it does essentially nothing to increase the public's ability to monitor the actions of these supposedly public schools. This board should support subjecting the boards of public charter schools to the same transparency requirements as other public schools. Their meetings should be subject to the Open Meetings Act, and their records should be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Anything less is unacceptable. We have a petition that asks the DC Council to enact just such a policy, and I'd like to ask each of you to sign it before you leave tonight. I want to spend the remainder of my time on a somewhat different issue, the issue of school closures. In December, this board voted 7-0 to close National Collegiate Prep after hearing impassioned testimony from staff members about the real-world challenges faced by their students and the school's role in helping their students deal with those challenges. Then last week, in a follow-up hearing on the campus of NCP, you heard even more moving testimony from teachers and administrators, but more importantly from the school's students and alumni. Dozens of students testified about the wonderful, caring, dedicated teachers and counselors at their school and the difference those adults in the school community had made in their lives. One recent graduate pleaded with you not to close her school, telling you, "This is my home, and I need my home." After all of that, you once again voted to close NCP, although the outpouring of support for the school apparently had some effect on some of you as the vote changed to 5-1, and you gave the school one additional year to wind down and for students to find new placements. This is shameful. Why does that school have to close? Because in the eyes of this board, the school's performance has not been good enough as measured by the PMF score, which is based largely on the students' standardized test scores, which you know are strongly correlated with poverty and students' at-risk status. Never mind the lives that the school has touched and helped to turn around. Never mind the value that the community places on that school. The numbers aren't good enough, so they have to close. If you are personally troubled by this situation but feel constrained by policy or politics, you need to do more to speak up against this sort of heartless decision. If you are a believer in this policy, you need to know that what you are doing is extremely destabilizing and harmful to people's lives. It is time for the people of this city to reassert control over our public schools.
Thank you all for coming out this evening. Next, I have Mateo Samper, Jenny Tomlinson, Kate Reinertson.
Tomlinson. Since I learned last week that my school will close at the end of the year, I've spent my time helping our students write admissions essays as they scramble to apply to new schools. Their first drafts can be a little weak sometimes, and I always tell them the same thing. Go back, revise, and rewrite in order to create a product that will accomplish your goal, gaining admittance to the school of their choice. As an educator, I have the same advice for this board. As it is written, the proposed transparency policy is inadequate. It does nothing to change the opacity of this city's charter landscape, and it will continue to allow absentee boards like the one at Chavez Schools and predatory for-profit charter management companies like 10 Square to operate in darkness. But perhaps that is the true goal of your proposed policy, to avoid ruffling the feathers of powerful players while congratulating yourselves on being advocates for transparency. If your goal is to promote the disenfranchisement of the most important members of a school community, the students, the families, and the staff, then by all means, you should pass this weak policy as it is written. You'll send a strong, clear message about who this board protects to every charter student, parent, and employee in this city. But if, as I hope, the goal of this board really is to shed light on the murky internal workings of charter schools, then you must see this proposed transparency policy for what it really is. Nothing more than a shallow, meaningless nod to transparency. I urge you to view the proposed policy as a first draft, and to go back, as I tell my students, go back, revise, and rewrite until you have created a policy that will bring meaningful transparency by making charters subject to FOIA and requiring them to open their board meetings. It may be too late for a strong transparency policy to protect the students at my school, but a robust policy can prevent students from other schools from being tossed out like trash as a result of decisions made behind closed doors without their knowledge or input. Thank you.
Mateo Samper, 8th grade English teacher, Cesar Chavez Prep. I am appalled by the clandestine decision made by our board to close Chavez Prep behind closed doors at a secret meeting. I would like to read part of a letter written from the board, by the board, to our teachers and staff. And dated June 9th, 2017, on the topic of our new CEO, Emily Silberstein. Quote, Emily worked with teachers across the country, elevating teacher voice and giving educators the opportunity to have a seat at the table when it comes to setting educational policy. And yet she eschewed repeated invitations to the bargaining table with our union, a failsafe put in place for our students, explicitly to protect them from the skullduggery that has occurred at these meetings. And they are not held accountable by you, the members of your board. Emily, quote, brought social justice issues to the forefront of their schools. Ladies and gentlemen, closing a school without warning, with 6 months warning, to 8th graders now scrambling for a high school seems like a miscarriage of justice. Emily, quote, will collaborate with all of us to continue the school improvement initiative plan that began this year. Our scholars put prep on the map as one of DC's top 10 most improved schools in terms of PMF growth. 10 Square gave up on those kids, and you need to hold them accountable with the new transparency policy. The board strongly identifies with our mission at Chavez to empower students to create a more free, just, and equal world. This is not equal, and this is not justice. As a board, quote, we are committed to the founding mission of our organization, aforementioned. We are committed to our teachers and staff. It doesn't feel like commitment from them, so I'm hoping we can get commitment from you. Si se puede. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kate Reinertson, and I'm a math teacher at Chavez Prep. I want to talk to you tonight about the injustices that occurred at my school this year. As you know, the Chavez board abruptly announced that we will be closing our doors at the end of the year without parent, teacher, or student involvement. This board of people made a closed-door decision about the lives of hundreds of families, leaving a score of teachers without jobs despite the fact that PARCC scores were improving. To prevent this outrageous failure from happening to other communities, I strongly advise expanding the proposed transparency policy to include teacher turnover numbers, whistleblower policies, employee handbooks, and teacher salary and benefits. It is in the best interest of taxpayers, teachers, and most importantly, students, for you to make these sorely needed changes today. It is harrowing that this is what 10 Square believes is good for charters and good for kids. All of the teachers here can attest that the only thing that is good for kids is having consistency in teachers and administration, which unfortunately our kids were denied. It is in your power to move towards this ideal by strengthening your transparency policy, and I hope you make the right decision today. As a first-year teacher, I can't tell you how deeply upsetting it is to see our 8th graders scrambling to find good high schools, and that should absolutely be on the minds of all of you tonight. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next three for public testimony, Frederick Mulhauser, Kara Howard, and Elizabeth Davis. Would you like to start?
My name is Elizabeth Davis. I'm president of the Washington Teachers Union. I represent more than 5,000 active and retired members of DC Public Schools, and I'm also a teacher and resident of Ward 5. I'm here to talk briefly about the systemic changes needed to the transparency policies that apply to DC charter schools. But I'm also here to express my outrage at the recent announcement that Chavez Prep will close, which is a perfect example of why transparency is so sorely needed. The announced closure of Chavez Prep would really hurt DC students and teachers. It has left students and their families confused and scrambling to find new schools for next year. But it also perpetuates a cycle of instability for students in DC charter schools and a lack of transparency about who is making decisions. To my knowledge, not a single student or teacher was permitted to have any voice in the decision to close Chavez Prep. The decision to do so was made behind closed doors at a secret board meeting without parents, teachers, or students. Teachers found out when they got a call from the Washington Post. Families got an email. This is unacceptable. DC charters need to be subject to FOIA and the Open Meetings Act. The proposed transparency policies needed to be significantly more robust. For example, the transparency policy should include information about teacher salaries, benefits, retention, and protections. These issues affect the performance, quality, and experience of teachers in schools, as well as the ability of teachers to stand up for their students without fear of retaliation. Members of this community and the DC community at large have a right to know the conditions in the schools their tax dollars are funding. The proposed transparency policy should also include information about who is making decisions, when they're making them, and what they are. For-profit management companies like 10 Square that fall again that fail again and again at their charter rescue business, as they did at Chavez Prep, should not be able to operate in the shadows anymore. The students and teachers at Chavez Prep and all DC public and charter schools deserve more, and the public deserves to know how our tax dollars are being used. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Howard.
My name is Kara Howard, and I am a former teacher at Chavez Prep and a Ward 1 resident. As a teacher at Chavez Prep, I saw firsthand what it was like to have decisions made behind closed doors that affected the students I taught daily without any input from the teachers and support staff that work directly with those students every day. Last week was a terrible example of what happens when charter schools are capable of making decisions without any transparency or accountability to the communities they serve. Without input from families or teachers, and without any warning to students, Chavez Prep decided to close its doors, leaving students and families without a community institution that had been in many of their lives for over 20 years. Literally generations of students and their families attended these schools. The transparency policy being proposed by the Public School Charter Board does not provide the transparency needed for communities to be able to hold their schools accountable. Without information, people cannot make decisions about the most important thing in their family's lives, their child's education. Charter schools should be subject to the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meeting Act. This level of transparency is absolutely needed to ensure that charter schools are serving their #1 constituencies, students and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Good evening. I'm Fritz Mollhauser. I'm the co-chair of the legal committee of the DC Open Government Coalition. We're a decade-old organization in the district. We hear from the community, we hear from attorneys and the press, and all those who are concerned that government actions and actions of those involving government funding are open and accessible. The proposal you have before you is okay. It reshuffles some deck chairs, puts some information on websites that may be more accessible, but let's face it, it's not transparency. The information was already out. It was on your website, and you're going to put it on the school's websites. Those are great. Real transparency is what I hear when people contact us. As the legal committee co-chair, I hear from teachers who call us and say, can they change my class size next year without even talking to me at the school board? And of course, you heard about the school closings that are done quietly behind closed doors. We hear from parents who say, how can I find out where that fundraising process has gone in my charter school? We have no idea where those monies went. And other budget issues. We hear from reporters who try and get information where sizable contracts have been placed and why. They can't find out. Supposedly the charter school board at your level knows, but you don't. Reporters say they found out after asking you. Dozens of contracts were not reported to them. And we hear from researchers who are trying to study things like principal turnover, not there on your data. Addressing these, you've heard. You need open meetings, you need open records access, and look, this is the practice in states around the country. The National Alliance of Charters says it's okay for states to require open meetings and FOIA type access. That's the trade group of your enterprise, and it's okay with them. We call on you to adopt this approach as a required policy now, and we call on you to encourage the schools to do so voluntarily while you work on the policy. Isn't that a good way to build the inclusive community we want, where we share facts and information and then we decide things? Thanks very much.
Thank you. If I could next invite up Juliana McCormick, Arthur Trainer, and Jennifer Sonkin. Whoever would like to start.
Mr. Cruz, I'm glad that you. Hi, I'm Jennifer Sonkin. I'm Jennifer Sonkin. Thank you. I've been at Chavez for 12 years, 11 years at Capitol Hill, and this is my first year at Prep. I'm glad you mentioned something about safety, because that's a big issue for all of our schools, and we keep hearing about 10 Square. So I would like y'all to start asking them about transparency, about how they now only, at least at Chavez schools, allow for, or in their budget, for one social worker in each school, yet they pocket a large amount of money for themselves, and we used to have 2.5 social workers at each school. So we have to ask ourselves, where's the money really going, and what is the purpose of the money? If they're trying to save schools, what is the point if they're not investing in the schools? 14 years ago, when I started at Chavez, it was the first time that Chavez had a real campus. That school created the teacher that I am today. Out of that school, I started a nonprofit with alumni, which is now 12 years old. I meet regularly with alumni. We meet twice a year, 50 plus. That school is a family. Prep creates families. These schools are families. Even a week ago, a student brought her sister in who said she wanted to meet you because she'll be in your class next year when she's in 6th grade. These kids, like I taught kids who went to Prep and then came and were my students at Chavez, Capitol Hill. I hung a mural in my classroom that Capitol Hill students painted in my classroom, and now I'm at their school at Prep. Like, this is a community. It's not just something you can throw away. We used to be empowered because of the mission and the vision that was given to us. So I ask all of y'all, what is the goal with students in DC? Like, what is y'all's goal for your community? I just want y'all to really reflect on that. Who's holding 10 Square accountable? Why are they the only organization, or excuse me, for-profit group to be able to come in and monopolize this city and not be held accountable at all? And they're pocketing the money that should be going to all the kids and their families to better them and their future. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Juliana McCormick, and I'm an English teacher at Chavez Prep. Last week, I held my students as they sobbed over our school's shocking closure. Tonight, I'll focus on one student in particular. This school is the first place I've felt safe, this 11-year-old shared. She had bounced between schools, facing relentless bullying at every turn. She had finally found her home, her haven, at Prep. She clutched me as she cried. She couldn't eat. She couldn't let go of me. And she couldn't let go of the question that plagued our whole community. Why? Why did this school close? She asked. I wished I could answer. I wished the explanation our board gave mere hours prior had made sense. I wished that our board had cared for the future of our kids. And ultimately, I wished that our community had the opportunity to prevent a decision that will so devastatingly displace us. Students, families, and staff deserve transparency. To close a school behind closed doors with no community input is unforgivable. The proposed transparency policy would permit such abhorrent actions to continue, and it must be reworked. You must rework it. Why did Prep close? Because my students are still asking. Had the greater school community been privy to the decision-making process, had there been open board meetings and honest communication, I might actually have an answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arthur Trainer. I'm a Ward 4 resident, and I'm the parent of a child at Basis DC Charter School. It's a great school for him. The teachers are great, just like all the teachers I've heard here tonight. As someone who's not plugged in with all the latest news and issues in the charter school community, I've learned a lot just sitting here from listening to these teachers give this testimony, and I want to thank all of them. And it's pretty inspiring. I want to get more involved hearing all of you. So as a parent of a child enrolled in Basis DC Public Charter, the transparency rule fails me personally in two ways. it doesn't permit me to know how much my child's teachers are being paid. And number two, it doesn't permit me to know how much the company that employs my child's teachers keeps as profit. And I think the deficiencies, these two deficiencies, are self-evidently unacceptable as a matter of democratic accountability. And I think, I don't need to get into explaining that. I think it's clear. But I want to talk about how they affect me personally in terms of my relationship with my child's school. At my child's school, a significant part of teacher compensation is provided in the form of bonus payments from an annual teacher fund. And with nearly every communication from the school, I receive a solicitation for a donation to the bonus fund. For the most part, my child's teachers, as I said, are great. And I want them to receive as large a bonus as possible and as much compensation as possible. And that's why I have contributed to the fund. But I confess I did that, made those contributions with some significant reservations. And those reservations stem from the fact that I don't really know, what that money is doing. Ultimately a check's being cut to the teachers, I know, but am I subsidizing the profits of a for-profit company that's out of state, and where they could have taken some of those profits and paid my teachers, my child's teachers, a greater salary, and now they're asking me to make up the difference? I don't know that that's the case. I want to be clear. I don't know that that's the case. But that's why I'm here. I want to know. And that's the problem with the transparency rule, is it won't let me know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Mariah Green, Liz Koenig, and Scott Goldstein.
Members of the Public Charter School Board, my name is Scott Goldstein, Executive Director of Empower Ed. Our public schools are a critical bedrock of our democracy. We know that schools with stronger family, student, teacher engagement produce stronger results. So we should do everything in our power to make sure they're armed with all of the information that they need to be part of the discussion. In fact, that is your argument for the choice model, that they have as much information as possible and parents can make choice with it. Several years ago, when teaching at a phenomenal DC charter school, I served as a teacher representative on our school's board of directors. I knew my input changed conversations, built a stronger school culture, and helped our board ensure the policies were in touch with the everyday realities of students and teachers in the classroom. And look at these teachers here today. You don't think they'd show up to board meetings and help solve a problem if they knew one existed? They would absolutely do that. If we want our schools to retain students, if we want to retain teachers, if every school was subject to the Open Meetings Act and to FOIA, teachers would show up, they would be part, and real engagement happens when stakeholders help make policy, not react to it. Transparency is in the system's best interest. When stakeholders are involved in solutions on the front end, you rarely are going to see these bad headlines on the back end. Some see transparency as cumbersome. Evidence points to the contrary. But if it were, legislation or policy would help you support those schools with those demands. Perhaps most disturbing is the idea that transparency is divorced from our work for better student outcomes. If you genuinely believe that, then you don't believe in the power of community engagement. Too often, those in positions of leadership see transparency as oppositional, but transparency is the opposite of that. It's how an organization shows value to those it serves, and it's how those in the community show loyalty to the institution they care deeply about. No one spends their free time attending a charter school board's meeting because they don't care about the school. All public schools should be equally public. Support for this idea is broad and deep in this city. We're activating those voices to ensure leaders like you, who at this moment, I'm sure believe national figures and institutions deserve some transparency right now, I ask you to live out those same values in your role in your own city here in DC. By embracing this proposal outright here, instead of waiting for accountability from the outside, you can show that you want to be faithful to the community you serve.
Good evening, DC Public Charter School Board members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input on the Public Charter School Board's new transparency policy. My name is Mariah Green, and I'm testifying in my capacity as a concerned resident and Chavez Capitol Hill alum. When I stepped foot on Chavez's campus in 2009, I was ushered into an environment that prided itself on community building and public service. Seeing the Washington Post headlines of the school's anticipated closure was beyond disheartening, because it was clear that community building and public service were no longer rooted in the decision-making processes that has resulted in Capitol Hill and Chavez's prep closure. What is even more disheartening is the impact that this closure will have on the lives of 1,500 students. The My School DC lottery closes for high school applications on February 1st, meaning that Chavez Prep's 58th graders have only 5 days to decide where they want to apply. Juniors at Chavez's Capitol Hill campus are parting ways with friends, teachers, and school counselors that they've built relationships with for 3 years. Now these students have to decide where they're going to spend their senior year of high school. Switching to school is no easy task for students or their families. It is no easy task to identify a school culture and a community that is suited for a child's needs in just 5 days. Due to a lack of transparency between the school's board, trustees, and school staff, students are now forced into a new school search process that they were not prepared for. This is why a robust transparency policy is necessary. To my knowledge, the anticipation of Chavez's school closure was not shared with teachers, students, or families in a sufficient amount of time, which would have allowed students to carefully weigh their options for the next school's choice. Instead, decisions were made behind closed doors, and teachers learned about the school closure through a Washington Post headline. This is unacceptable and is most certainly a disservice to our students, families, and teachers who instilled trust into a school that they truly believe was their community. The transparency policies should include teacher retention rates, student enrollment and retention rates, and quarterly funding status. Students, families, and teachers deserve to know what decisions are being made in their schools on a daily basis so that they can make tactful, informed decisions. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Liz Koenig. I'm a charter teacher in the city and a member of Empower Ed's Teacher Council, and I'm here to comment on the proposed transparency policy. I think you probably meant to name this policy website document policy, but now that you've named it transparency, we're all here to tell you what we think the word means. Posting at-risk student funding plans, annual reports, and board meeting calendars on school websites, while important, is not true transparency. True transparency would guarantee families, teachers, and citizens access to those board meetings and allow them to understand not only the amounts, but also the justifications of school funding decisions. I've read that this board's chairman believes that the current level of transparency is sufficient and that schools need to retain flexibility. Unexplained to me is how increasing public access to school governance and financial information would impinge upon this flexibility in any way. Flexibility at the cost of preventing access to information and eroding public trust is not a price our city should be willing to pay. We are here to tell you tonight that the current level of transparency of our public schools is insufficient, and we ask you to support changes to legislation to subject charter schools to the Open Meetings Act and the DC Freedom of Information Act. While there are many teachers here tonight adding their voices to the push for more transparency, there are many others that feel restricted in their ability to ask for more from their schools and their school board. I myself have been verbally and in written evaluations reprimanded by my administration for going outside the chain of command by signing a letter to my board raising concerns about increasing class sizes in our department. To those teachers who feel restricted or hopeless in some way, I ask you to come join us to push for what we know is right for our schools and our students. Look us up and add your voice to ours. By signing our petition for changing charter transparency laws, I have some here if you'd like to sign, testifying at public hearings like this one, or showing solidarity with teachers whose jobs have been eliminated when schools close because of standardized test scores. Transparency builds trust, and we deserve to trust in our public schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sabrina Shorter. Is Ms. Shorter here? All right. So at this point, we're going to turn to opening for a public hearing on several issues before us, including the school transparency policy, or at least the presentation by staff. But first, we have 2 charter amendments for the public hearing this evening. Capital City Public Charter School, a goals amendment, and Early Child Academy PCS new location amendment. Nikhil, will you be present? I don't know where you might be. Nikhil, if you want to present on Capital City.
Hello, my name is Nikhil Vashi, School Quality and Accountability Specialist. At this time, I'd like to invite the delegation from Capital City to please join us. This is a public hearing to discuss a request by Capital City to update its goals and academic achievement expectations to adopt the Performance Management Framework, or PMF, as its goals for its lower and middle school campuses, and to remove its mission-specific goal. The school is scheduled to undergo its 20-year review in school year 2019-20. The school's leadership is here to answer any questions about the amendment you may have.
Would you start by introducing yourselves and any opening comments you have, or maybe begin by giving a little rationale for your decision?
Hi, I'm Karen Dresden. I'm the head of school at Capital City.
I'm Dominique Coote, Student Performance Data Manager.
And we're requesting to adopt the PMF as our goals. We had previously had the PMF as our goals for just the high school campus. We operate 3 campuses, lower school, middle school, and high school. We had our own goals for lower school and middle school, but the added burden of tracking two sets of goals while really working towards the PMF goals every year has been burdensome, and we would like to just streamline our accountability and reporting by adopting the PMF as goals for all 3 campuses.
Board members, any questions?
Hi, thank you for joining us here tonight. Could you share with us how you plan to continue prioritizing your expeditionary learning model if the school's mission specific?
Absolutely. I mean, our school fully implements the expeditionary learning model, now called EL Education. In fact, we serve as a mentor school nationally for the model, and we have an implementation review every year, and we have received the highest ratings for that review. I think I think the issue is just whether that's part of our accountability framework, and we feel like we will continue to implement the model, but the issue with having it as another accountability measure is that currently the measure is how well we do on an implementation review framework that could easily change, especially within the next 5 years. So we just really would like to keep implementing the model, but have the PMF as our accountability.
And in terms of your transition, is there anything you learned from the high school transitioning to the PMF that would be informative, or what do you plan to do to ensure that the middle and lower school in that transition is going to be sufficient?
Well, we've been held accountable for the PMF. We've been, ever since the PMF was adopted, we have been focused on the PMF because our school is tiered by the PMF every year. And I think the reason that we initially elected to write our own goals was when we renewed our charter. back in 2015, we didn't even have a first set of park data yet, and our school had recently moved. So there were just a lot of unknowns at the time, which was why we, at the time, decided to write our own goals. But I think, now that we've been, park has been the assessment used for a while, and we've been implementing the PMF longer, I think we feel confident in our ability to track to that. Do you have anything?
The only thing I will add is that we have been working towards using data in an actionable way in our school. And one of the things we have found is when we have multiple assessments being used across accountability frameworks, it can be confusing to our teachers and limit some of the nimbleness with which we can try different things. So I think by adopting the PMF, which is at the forefront of both our leaders and our teachers' minds, and involve assessments that they're familiar with, gives us that one framework to work towards, and then we can sort of work around that, or not work around it, but try other things without feeling like something's tied to another structure that isn't at the forefront of their minds.
As the leader that you are in the EL space, if I'm understanding correctly what you just shared, the framework for the implementation review changes, and some of that creates maybe some sort of difficulty.
It has changed a number of times over the years, and nobody asked for our permission to change it, so it's not really under our control. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what challenges has that created, if any?
I think that, it has been, I think a lot of times it changes because it improves. And so that is not in and of itself a problem, but it is a problem when it's tied to something as high stakes as our, charter renewal.
Yeah. And could I ask, how have you engaged, or how has the board engaged around the decisions to change your accountability?
Yes. So we have a school performance committee of our board, and the school performance committee took the, we talked about it at a full board meeting when we talked about our framework and presented our data in the fall. And then our school performance committee looked at this issue, and the committee made a recommendation to the full board. The full board took this up at our November meeting, and passed a resolution to submit the proposal.
Don, since you're by phone, any questions? I think that was a no. Okay, thank you.
I was looking at the performance for your middle school, and in the past 5 years, it has received 4 PMF scores. When I take the average of those PMF scores, it's 54.6. The school's committing to maintain an average of 50 on the PMF, and so just want to be sure that the school and the board, if the numbers are wrong, let me know. I'm just looking at your PMF report card and just divided the numbers. But if it's that close, I just want to make sure that the board is going into this with the full knowledge and understanding that it is committing to an average score of 50, and that particularly in a in a renewal year, the board has no authority not to renew the school if it's.
I actually think the numbers are higher than that if we count. I think it may be that you're not including 2018.
I'm not including 2015, where we didn't publish a score.
Oh, got it. Okay, I see. So our score, so the last 3 years, if we looked at the last 3 years, the lowest score in the last 3 years was 57. So, so I think, we feel like those have trended up, and we understand the metric, and I think are more accustomed to taking PARC. In our middle school, PARC is the main driver of the PMF score, and because all of our students in our middle school take PARC. So I think, now that there's more familiarity with the metric, and all the work that's been done with our teachers and staff around implementing Common Core, we feel confident that we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if we maybe can make sure that we know what those numbers are before, because we're not voting on this until next month, so just make sure that
Yeah,
we're all
I mean,
aligned
the
with what
average
those
I
numbers
used
are.
includes a score from 2014, which was the significantly lower. That would not be part of the equation, but I was just saying it illustratively because I would just want to make sure that the school and its board are going into this with eyes wide open about the rigidity of that particular, of the accountability metrics in the PMFS goals.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. We'll be voting on this matter next month, so thank you. All right. I think Terry or Alyssa is joining us.
All right. Hi, my name is Alyssa Noth, and I am a senior specialist on the school quality and accountability team. I'm here tonight with leadership from Early Childhood Academy Public Charter School. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Wendy Edwards. I'm the executive director.
Dennis Sawyers, I'm the chair of the board.
Deborah Foster, I'm the financial manager.
Thane Ingram, I'm the principal.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing to discuss Early Childhood Academy's public charter school's request to relocate its entire student population to a new facility located at 885 Barnaby Street Southeast in Ward 8, effective for school year 2019-20. Currently, Early Childhood Academy operates as a single campus across two small facilities on 9th Street Southeast in Ward 8, which are directly adjacent to the proposed new location. The school plans to vacate from the two smaller facilities at the end of school year 2018-19 and begin operation at the new site in July 2019. Representatives are here for your questions.
Great. Maybe start by giving us a bit of a sense of the decisioning that went into what you're proposing.
Sure. So we opened in 2005, and we, since that time, we've been located in two community centers that are about a block from one another because we needed the space. So we've always been one school in two facilities. It's been problematic for a number of reasons. First, both of the facilities are shared spaces. So we have churches that use one of the spaces. We have a DC government organization that uses the other space. We are limited in the times and days of the week that we can use the space. We're not able to use the space on weekends or in evenings. And our children have to commute back and forth between the buildings because our cafeteria is in one building, our music program is in one building, but serve all the children. So since 2005, we've actually been looking for a permanent school home, and we finally were able to secure a property right behind our current property, right across the alley, that will hold all of our students pre-K 3 to 3rd grade.
Excellent.
Hello. What type of community engagement have you done with your families and people in the neighborhood?
We've had a number of meetings with our current families. We actually had meetings starting, I think, in 2017, where we had families sign a petition that I think is attached to the application to indicate that they were in favor of this move. We presented at the ANC meeting in April of 2018 18 to present our proposal to them. We have met with Eugene Wilkerson, who is the HOA board president for the Walter Washington Estates, which is directly behind our building. And we had an official event back in September for the community, for our parents, and for other stakeholders to actually let them learn more about our facility and look at the construction that's already taking place.
I know you have an enrollment increase planned. Can you just talk about how you plan to recruit more students and how that effort's going?
Sure. So our enrollment this year was 254. We are authorized for 300 students, but we've never been able to reach that because of the limitations of our two buildings. We feel secure that we will be able to reach 300 students because we are a Tier 1 school for the past 3 years. As new schools have sprouted up all around us, new buildings, we've been able to maintain our market share, and we are going to increase incrementally. So next year we are projecting 250, although we probably will, recruit more. The year after that, we are projecting 285, I believe. The year after that, 290, and then 300. With the new building going up and all of the excitement in the community as they see it go up, we feel very confident that we will fill our building.
What's the current status of the new site, the new building?
It's coming along very well. The contractor, Meridian Construction, is projecting a date of mid-July 2019 for completion. And they seem to be pretty steadfast that that will be the date that it will be completed. The exterior of the building is up, and so because the roof is on, there shouldn't be a lot of problems with them staying on schedule, since weather should not be a factor going forward. So we're pretty confident that July will be in.
If there's a challenge to that delivery timeline, especially given that you're talking about enrolling a larger number of students, who I imagine can't fit in the existing site, what are the scenarios?
So we have already decided that we're going to have school open for students after Labor Day this year. Normally we open in August, but to just give ourselves enough wiggle room, if there are any delays, we're going to open after Labor Day. We feel that there should be no issue with us being able to get the students in and get school running in September, with the teachers coming back sometime in mid-August.
And how are parents feeling about that?
Oh, you mean about the delayed?
The later start.
So we actually had a year-round program for the past 2 years. Some parents loved it, some parents didn't like it at all. So they're mixed feelings, I think.
Do you anticipate any other challenges or problems?
We really don't, because it is literally across the alley from our current building. It's just the ideal location for us.
I do have another question, which is if I'm looking at the PMF, you're just over the 65% cutoff for Tier 1, and the trajectory has been going down. As you think about, I'd love your reflections on what has gone well, what hasn't, and as you think about the growth of the school. So you've got 2 transitions coming up: a new site, which it sounds like is a good thing, but it's still a transition, and then secondly, more students, more teachers that go along with that, and how does quality dovetail with all of those changes?
So we do know that we have been trending downward, and we were very glad to learn that we were still a Tier 1 school. However, we realized that we want the trajectory to change. We have done a lot of work around bringing in experts in reading, in ELA, and in math to support our teachers on a more regular schedule in implementing a rigorous instructional program. We think that because we've lost some teachers, and so, we start over with new teachers that come in, and we kind of have to remember that the new teachers don't have the benefit of past professional development that has helped our teachers who are seasoned, who have been with us for a while, understand our approach to ELA and to teaching mathematical reasoning, that we have to make sure that our professional development is ongoing for all teaching staff. So we've looked at that this year and actually worked with a really good reading specialist who has created a literacy manual to support our teachers in ELA in particular, because we know that that's where not all just our children struggle, but where all children struggle in reading comprehension. And so our goal is to, as you said, change the trajectory and start moving that line up instead of down.
Don, do you have any questions? Any other?
I just think it's worth noting that with the exception of Digital Pioneers, this is I think the last charter school that is located in a church basement. And so I think we can all celebrate this moment.
And it sounds like you're going to have a lot of great space for the students as well,
Wonderful.
outdoor. So
Yeah,
that's
playground space. Yeah, it's a great building. Come by. It's right on.
I was going to comment. I have not yet been to either of your two sites, so
Please come
we will
by.
squeeze one of those in before I get to see the big thing.
That'd be great.
Next year. Great. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Again, we'll be
Thank you.
voting on this next month.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Rashida.
Hello, I'm Rashida Young, Director of the Equity and Fidelity Team. This is a public hearing for the school transparency policy, which was open for public comment at the December 17th board meeting. The vote is currently scheduled for February 25th. This policy describes the documents the DC Public Charter School Board will require schools to post on their websites beginning in school year 2019-20 and the process for doing so. These documents include the following: the Charter School Board of Trustees meeting calendar, the high school course offerings and graduation requirements, school calendar, student handbook, at-risk funding plans, annual report, Title IX coordinator contact information, lottery procedures for schools not participating in My School DC, student application for schools not participating in My School DC, and the student enrollment form. While the Public Charter School Board has historically posted some of these and other school documents on our website, parents are more likely to visit a school's website for these documents and information. Furthermore, at times, the school will change the content, making the documents on our website inaccurate. We have sought school leader feedback via the Charter Leaders Meeting and a School Leader Task Force meeting, and have incorporated much of it into the policy. We will hold another feedback session for schools on February 5th, at which time we will discuss all the comments that people tonight have raised. We have also sought parent feedback from the Parent Alumni Leadership Council, or the PALC. The PALC provided feedback suggesting additional documents schools should publicly post, which we will also discuss at the meeting that we will hold next week.
All right. Board members?
Hi, thank you for that. I was curious, the annual report is one of the items to be included, and I'm guessing for academic and performance-related information, it would be housed within an annual report? Or
Yes.
has there been consideration of pulling out any specific academic data points?
So the schools do include like their goals and academic information in the annual report, and this is one of the documents that PCSB has traditionally had on our own website that we, through this policy, would require that schools would have on their own websites.
Can you talk about the task force process? You mentioned it, and so the comments that we heard tonight, can you explain how those will be utilized through the task force process?
Yes, sure. So we have gone through a couple of iterations of this policy. Like I said, we first raised the idea at the charter school leaders meeting this past fall. The charter school leaders meeting is a meeting that is generally attended by school leaders, executive directors, and the feedback that we got from that session, as well as the task force meeting that we held in, I believe it was November, we tweaked the policy based off some of that feedback. The feedback that we hear tonight is something that has not been, many of those comments were not raised in those initial meetings, and so that's something that we will raise at that meeting that we're holding on February 5th. And I realize that tonight's voice was primarily staff, and the voice that we hear at the task force meeting has traditionally been school leaders, but I still think that it will be a valuable meeting to basically bring those two voices together to consider the suggestions that were made tonight and tie them into the suggestions that school leaders have made in the past.
In one of the comments made tonight, there was a reference to what the National Alliance of Public Charter Schools has outlined. What other best practices or information has gone into the development of the plan as it stands? Just for transparency's sake tonight, so people know where some of the things that are included.
Sure.
Where that came
So
from.
this initial list, which I believe is 10 items, much of that came from documents that people have requested of PCSB when they've called in or emailed in to ask us for information, or documents that other stakeholders have sought on our website. That's really what drove that initial list, and we again tweaked it based on what we heard from schools. Like I said, at the PALC meeting, they had introduced another about 10 items, and so, you know, from our viewpoint, this is additional data that we're getting now that we didn't have before when the policy was initially written, and we'd like to use all of these points of view to come up with our final policy. And so, you know, it is an iterative process, and I appreciate all of the feedback. And like I said, we are scheduled to have this, the vote in February. If the discussions take longer than the meeting next week and beyond, you know, it has happened in the past that we have pushed public comment an additional month to make sure that we can really talk through all of the details and come up with the best final policy.
I was just going to say, sometimes if in response to public comment the proposal changes enough that it merits another round of public comment, we'll often release it a second time so that people have the opportunity to comment on the revised approach that we're taking.
I'm curious, in the school leader meeting, did the school leaders offer their perspective based on the kind of production of data? And did they mention the kind of inbound inquiries from parents that are comparing schools?
Actually, the theme of the meeting was more on the documents themselves, and what guidance PCSB would be providing to for schools, like what content should be in those documents, whether something could be misconstrued from school to school. It had more to do with the actual content of what the documents should have, as opposed to, you know, some of the comments we heard tonight.
All right, 2 more questions.
Sure.
So to that point, are there standard things that the annual report has to have in it? And then 2, schools have to collect their meeting minutes, right? They produce those to us?
Yes.
Okay.
So So several of, so in terms of your first question, the annual report, there are documents, all of our documents have a set of criteria or look-fors that when a school submits them to us, that we review to say, okay, this is compliant. We post it on our website. Next year, we'll ask the schools to post it. In terms of, I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part of your question? I just forgot it.
Meeting minutes.
The meeting minutes.
Yeah.
We receive meeting minutes. The policy as it stands has schools submitting the meeting calendar. It doesn't have the school submitting their minutes. We do receive the minutes, read the minutes, contact schools if there's a question or some sort of concern about any issue. But it's not something that to this point we have shared out publicly.
Although meeting minutes are available to the public through FOIA.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir, they are. Individuals can submit a FOIA request to the DC Public Charter School Board, who will then turn over the meeting minutes that have been provided to us by the public charter school. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear about that. We do collect the minutes. We don't publish them. We don't publish them or require the schools to publish them. However, we collect them, we read them, we store them, and then we make them available to anybody who requests them of us through the FOIA process.
Rashida, you mentioned feedback that we received from the PALC and perhaps other parties. Could you maybe provide a little bit more detail about feedback that we have gotten outside of feedback that we've gotten from school leaders?
Sure. So there was a PALC meeting held in mid-January where we shared the current list of items, and some of the additional items that those members requested were school budgets and how they use the funds, goals and targets as outlined in the school's charter, philanthropy dollars, the McKinney-Vento homeless coordinator, special education coordinators, schools org charts, school department heads, information on transportation operations, and the student family handbook. That is on the list, but they wanted clarity that it's not just the student handbook, it's a student and family handbook.
Don, do you have any questions at this time? Good. As I've done on previous task force, I'd love to participate in the next one next
Sure.
week. So
Definitely.
Just make a note of
Okay.
including me on that if possible.
Great.
Feedback. All right. Did you? Go.
So there were multiple things that were brought up this evening that should be taken in consideration. In terms of partners or other organizations that are involved in the operations of charter schools, be it turnaround organizations or others, do those partners or other organizations have any input into what was added to the policy?
So we're taking all of the input. When it was released for public comment, that was us, sharing it with all stakeholders. And so to date, aside from the folks that have spoken tonight and the PALC members, the only other group that we've received feedback from is 10 Square. So their suggestions will also be something that we discuss at our meeting next week in terms of, all of it. We're going to look at all of it comprehensively.
Scott, did you have a?
And in the document we prepare for your vote, we will include all public comment received, including who submitted it, what it said, and what our response to it is, and how we've incorporated it into the revised policy, or in cases where we have elected not to incorporate it into the revised policy, our reasons for doing that.
Excellent. So let me just close out our public hearing and this conversation by, again, saying thank you to everyone who came forward to add their voice to this particular issue, also those who came to support those. As Rashida laid out, we've got a few process steps still in this process, including taking into account a lot of the feedback that was provided. For anyone who didn't get a chance to speak this evening on the School Transparency Act, or for those who did and want to submit their formal comments, again, it's public comment at dcpcsb.org. Please send that to us. And again, just to recap the process, there'll be a task force meeting next week. We'll be looking at all of the feedback that's been provided up until that time, and we'll make a call as to whether the revisions are such that they would suggest us opening for another public hearing to look at whatever revisions are in that process. All right. Thank you, Rashida.
Thank you.
All right, we're now going to move from our public hearing to our public meeting. And I'm going to start by asking the board to approve the agenda. I'm going to give us a second. Thank you.
Is the...
All right, so before we move to approve the agenda, we will need to remove one item. As I mentioned in my opening comments, National Collegiate Prep has signed a charter amendment with conditions of closure that will allow it to continue operating for one more year, so we don't need to hold another vote. So I will ask for two motions. The first, a motion to amend the agenda.
I move to amend the January 28th, 2019 board meeting agenda to remove the National Collegiate Preparatory Public Charter High School item from the agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Don? Excellent. Okay. And then if I could, so agenda amended. Can I get a second motion?
I move to approve the January 28th, 2019 board meeting agenda as amended.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, I got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent, thank you. All right, agenda amended and approved. We're going to open up for public comment on any of the matters before us for voting this evening. Are there any public officials in attendance who wish to speak or be recognized? Any public officials? All right. For any of the matters on the agenda for vote this evening, anyone want to offer any public comment at this point? All right. Well, then we are going to go to a threesome of charter renewals, starting with DC Bilingual.
Hello. Tonight, the board will vote on the charter renewals of 3 public charter schools. I will read the charter renewal standard once, and it will apply to each school. The School Reform Act requires charter schools to apply every 15 years to renew their charter. The law requires that the board shall not renew a school's charter if the school committed a material violation of applicable laws or a material violation of the conditions, terms, standards, or procedures set forth in its charter, including violations related to the education of children with disabilities, or if the school has failed to meet the goals and student academic achievement expectations set forth in its charter. Additionally, there is a fiscal component to this review. We are required to revoke a school's charter if we determine that the school engaged in a pattern of non-adherence to generally accepted accounting principles, has engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, or is no longer economically viable. With that standard stated, our first school for review is DC Bilingual. I'd like to invite school leadership to just state their name and introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. My name is Daniela Anello, and I'm head of School of DC Bilingual Public Charter School. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm accompanied by our board chair, Susie Rosenbaum, and our school principal, Alina Tuyare, and our director of data and accountability, Rohini Ramnath, as well as some phenomenal DC Bilingual students, Maxwell and Violet, and they're also my children. And also some of our incredible staff and partners. Thank you for being here with us.
DC Bilingual is a single campus school with grades PK3 through 5. The school has adopted the Performance Management Framework, or PMF, as its goals. Pursuant to these goals, DC Bilingual has met its goals and student academic achievement expectations. Staff has determined that the school has not committed a material violation of the law or of its charter, has adhered to generally accepted accounting principles, has not engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, and is economically viable. Staff recommend that the board vote to renew the school's charter. The school's leadership is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Excellent. Do you want to start by saying anything else?
Of course. I always have a lot to say.
I know.
So I'm really honored to be here in representation of our school. Our school obviously has been operating for 15 years. I have been a part of the school for 10 years. This is my 10th year. Our school's mission is to provide a high-quality, well-rounded education for students in grades pre-K3 to grade 5, and in 2 languages, Spanish and English. And we seek to meet the mission by providing any child who is placed in our school with this high-quality education. This means we accept children in all grades, pre-K3 to grade 5, which is atypical for a bilingual charter school. The work that we have done as a school has been tremendous, and it speaks to the commitment and dedication of our full staff, our board, our parents, students, and everyone around us. In the 15 years that we've operated as a school, I can honestly say that it has not been a piece of cake. We were, for the first 11 years of operation, we were in partnership with Centronia. They served as our management company. We shared building space with them, and we had 2 buildings that we had to expand to when we grew out of the space that we had available to us in the original campus, which we shared with Centronia. So for the first 11 years, our school was not operating in a school building. We were in office spaces, and we still made it work. We still served our children in the best way we could. For the past 5 years, I should say, we actually had a major school transformation. We were given the opportunity to relocate to a new campus. With the relocation, lots of other things that could have been challenges for our community actually served as amazing opportunities. We became an independent school, self-operating in our own campus. With the transition, we moved to 33 Riggs Road and have our pre-K3 to grade 5 all under one roof. With the transition, we also received 90 students from the previous school, Community Academy Public Charter School. They're currently thriving in our dual language program, although the school that they were coming from was not a dual language school, and the parents did not necessarily select to have their children in a bilingual school. So we're really proud of the success that we've had with these students. I can tell you that among the challenges our school has faced, we have experienced some financial struggles. We have experienced adjusting to being self-operating. We have recently had a modernization, and yet, even still, we've maintained a very laser-like focus on our students' achievement, on the well-roundedness of our program, and on providing our students with the highest quality education possible. This year is our third year serving as meeting a Tier 1 school's expectations. Last year, we served the highest percentage of ELL students, or the second highest percentage of ELL students in the city, charter sector. We currently educate students from all 8 wards, and we have one of the highest application rates out of any charter school in the city. Again, this has been thanks to a coordinated effort and very strong dedication of all of our school community. Even still, we have a very clear focus on continuous improvement. We notice when things can be improved, and we're very critical of our school and all of the structures that we hold in our school as important. Last year, we saw that our park scores dipped, and this year we immediately began a 3-part park refocusing initiative in which we are very much focused on preparing our students in a way where we haven't prepared them before to understand that it's important to show their best learning even on high stakes tests like PARCC, which is something we didn't necessarily talk about in that way before. We're also engaging our full community. Our board of directors as well as our parents and staff are having very intentional conversations with us around how to prepare our students for success in this high stakes test. And as school leaders, our academic leaders are focusing much more intentionally on interim assessments, data analysis, and on reteaching. Last year, we had the opportunity to develop a strategic plan thanks to the support of Bellwether and Ed Forward. And now we have, we're executing a really intentional strategic plan that focuses on maintaining our school vision for high achievement that is well-rounded while also considering school growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's your 15th, so if anyone else, Ms. Rosenbaum, if anyone else wants to add anything to that.
We are fortunate to have an amazing school leadership, and I think that they speak for themselves.
Excellent.
So, DC bilingual is really unusual in a good way, I think. So I'm gonna lead up to a meta question. If you think about the schools that feed into DC International, you all have by far the highest percentages of students we might call disadvantaged, ELL, at risk, economically disadvantaged. I think even special ed, I think you're the highest there as well. But you maintain high academic standards, you have very low suspension rates. How do you pull this off? I mean, this is no, really, it's a school that's integrated. It's a school that adequately academically serves disadvantaged students. How is it that you're able to attract higher income parents in a school that's predominantly low income, not leave the low income students behind? I mean, how are you able to pull all this off when this is something we're really looking to replicate across the city? And I'm asking a serious question.
I'm going to give my answer, and I invite my team members to give their own. I think that we lead with our heart. We honestly all believe that this mission to provide the best and most well-rounded education to every single student that walks into our school building is something we actually believe very much so, and we do not let anybody slip through the cracks. Each one of us cares so much about every child that we educate that many of us who have children that are school age have moved to the city to be able to have our children attend the school. I reside in Tenleytown, and my children could attend Janney Elementary, which, as you all know, is a high-performing elementary school. But instead, there was absolutely no way my children wouldn't attend what I consider the highest performing and best, well-rounded bilingual school in the city, which is DC Bilingual. So I think that the actions that I've taken and many leadership team members have taken speak louder than words, in the sense that this is genuinely the school we believe is giving the best education to students, and I think that message is seen by everyone in all 8 wards, and there's something about our school that attracts a wide range of people from, again, all 8 wards, and some people willing to make 45 to an hour minute commute to get to the school each day. And it must be because they feel that their child is loved, nourished, and educated well, and we are holding everybody to a very high level of expectation, and I think that anybody who has children would want that for their child.
I just want to add that I think that the level of commitment that our staff is something that I haven't seen anywhere else. I started as a Spanish teacher 12 years ago, and I'm the principal. This is my 3rd year as the principal of the school, and I had the opportunity to grow with the school, to learn with the school. When we did our strategic plan last year, we determined our core elements and really developing all of us being learners and taking a deep look into how we develop not only students but also teachers and staff members was a big priority, and I think that that's what makes our school unique. Many of the teachers and staff that are here have a story to tell about how they grew in our school, how they became what they want to be, and I think that that shares and sells a really powerful story for our students that see also their staff being committed to be lifelong learners.
I was going to ask, what you described is something that so many families are looking for, dual language schools. You see it in the data, you see it in your wait list. To your credit, you've often, in private and in meetings, talked about your concern that over time you won't be able to serve the students that the school was initially founded to serve, the students who might not have great choices elsewhere. I don't see that in the numbers yet. I'm pleased that you worry about that, but I'd just love like the current state of that. And then a 2-part question, which is related. No one does a strategic planning exercise as like the one you guys are undertaking without thinking about growth. So what does this mean for what you may be coming forward to ask of us in the future?
Great question. Our school has a strong mission to serve high-need students, and if we're not doing that, we're not serving the mission of our school. And so to us, family recruitment of high-need families who need this high-quality education is essential. So it's not necessarily, I would say, the language, the native language that we need, although it is helpful to have a 50-50 model in which at least 50% of the population speaks Spanish. I think that what rings true for us is serving the high-need student population that our mission seeks to serve, and we think we figured out a way to help close the achievement gap, and doing it bilingually, which is so much cooler. But to speak about that, in the strategic planning process, we had to create a family recruitment plan. And so we have a very detailed, about 30-page plan that speaks about how we hope to go out into the community and to talk to all of our Ward 4, Ward 5, even go to Ward 6 and 7 families and tell them about our school. I also decided to run for a My School DC board seat, and I got it. And I'm sitting at the My School DC board as a representative of at-risk families and ensuring that we can think wisely about the process that families must take when they're applying for schools, and making sure that they actually do have a choice and they know what those choices are and that they know what the process is to be able to have that choice. So I'm happy to send the recruitment plan your way. I don't have to get into the weeds of it right this second, but we are currently executing it. We, again, it includes canvassing, it includes calling families that have applied to our school to ensure that they know that the ranking matters. It includes going to all of the neighborhood areas where the families are and telling them that our school exists. It also includes having a parent computer station available for families at all times in our school building, and being able to be supportive of any family walking into the building with the application process itself, and offering that help in Spanish or English.
And have you seen a decline in being able to serve or seats for the high need students that you've been targeting? Because I want to understand if you're starting to see that dynamic already. You obviously have a plan in place too.
Right. We have started seeing a slight decline, especially of families who receive free or reduced lunch. It was above 80% when we were in Columbia Heights, and now it's nearing the 70% mark.
Sorry.
Oh, there was growth question. I'm ready for that too.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, correct.
The strategic plan outlines growth. I have to tell you that I am in love with the community that we are in, which is Ward 5. The majority of our families, if they were able to did move to relocate closer to our school. We have invested $4.5 million in a school modernization project and worked really, really hard to make that space comfortable for families and students and staff. If we grow, I am determined to stay in that neighborhood and look for land, unoccupied buildings, spaces anywhere close to our current campus to add more programmatic space. I have my eyes set on some vacant land really, really close to the school building. So I'm trying to work my magic with that. But I have this vision for expansion within our current campus, and not relocating to another part of town. But if this plan works as we envision, we could serve close to 710 students within the next 5 years.
I just want to echo my colleague, Mr. Bumbal's, just amazement at what you've been able to do and the diversity of your student body and your commitment, frankly, to having a diverse student body. It's truly remarkable. I also really want to call out and commend you on taking students throughout all of the years. My first year on the board, you came to us. I think you were just taking over CAPS, and we're talking about that plan. So we'd just love to have you talk about how you do that. I mean, it's been something that I think several schools have struggled with, to take kids in the upper grades into bilingual ed, but also just frankly to backfill through all their years. So I'd love to hear about how you've been successful at that.
So we always spoke about how, we're the kind of school that can take any student, even if they've never experienced bilingual education, and get them to be as bilingual as possible, and have our program work for all students. But we weren't really tested on that until that year in 2015, when there were 90 new students coming into the grades where, language acquisition is a little tougher. It happens a little bit slower. So to modify our language program, which the original program has students starting in kindergarten spending half their day in a Spanish language classroom and the other half of the day in the English language classroom, to accommodate for a language acquisition experience that wouldn't be incredibly stressful for children in a new school, and with a new type of learning program. We added a third type of class, which we called the transitional class, and it had a lead Spanish teacher and a lead English teacher in the same classroom. This way, students could feel more comfortable learning the second language, and they could use their first language to access the second language in a comfortable learning environment. I would like to invite my team members to talk a little bit about the success that the particular students have had. But I do have to share that we do recognize language learning takes time, and although they're having great success in our program, we recognize that the longer they stay with us, and should we have a middle school or a high school in the future, that we see the true fruits of bilingualism the longer they stick with it. Oh, no one wants to add anything, okay?
The only thing I would add is that the board is very supportive and very encouraging of the staff's emphasis on continuing the focus on children who are coming to us with more challenges. So there's great commitment on the board for that.
Oh, Don, sorry, thank you for Don. Do you have any?
I do actually.
See, thank you.
I'll be chair in congratulations for just taking on one challenge after another over my time on the board. I have one specific question, and that is about your school's support for classroom teachers and professional development for classroom teachers. You've been one of, I believe, the highest performer in categories of the class measures developed at the University of Virginia, particularly for instructional and emotional support. And I wonder if you could sort of speak to that, how your teachers, your classroom teachers are consistently showing very, very, very strong results on a pretty sophisticated measure, and how you're prioritizing supporting classroom teachers to achieve that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we have actually some pre-K teachers that can actually talk about that. We were very purposeful in the way that we look at we started with early childhood and looking at the social emotional support and the classroom organization. It really starts with professional development, and for that, developing an instructional leadership team that is a strong team that actually has time to work with teachers. And so as the principal, I make sure that we can have a coaching team, that we can have a budget for staff to actually learn. And with that, we had now, I want to say 5-6 years ago, an ECE coach that was a classroom teacher, highly effective, that we were able to mentor into the role. And she was the one that pushed to have the class as a measure, but also for teachers to understand what it was and why it was important to work on student-teacher interactions. And with that, we were able to train our teachers to talk about it. We continue to have class PLCs in our ECE program. Many of our classroom teachers and coaches are class certified, and so it's something that we put a lot of effort in it, and we talk not only to the teachers that are actually evaluated by class, but also to the whole staff. 2 years ago, we were able to revisit our Leading and Learning Framework, that's our teacher evaluation rubric, and implement a lot of the class language into it, and that gave us the opportunity to work school-wide with the social emotional language. And continuing, even if it's not formally part of the PMF, training teachers in K-5 to understand the importance of the interaction and the social, emotional, and classroom organization support. So it's an ongoing effort. We realize that we need to continue to develop and talk about it year after year if we want to continue to see high scores.
I just want to add that when we talk about our school, it's incredibly important to talk about the systems that we've put into place for the past 10 years that we continue to improve upon. And professional development is one of those big systems. The way in which we have coaches, the way in which coaches spend all of their time either leading intervention groups, understanding the student data, or observing teachers to provide them with feedback. On Fridays from 1 to 4, it's our staff PD days every Friday, are the decisions we make around which professional developments to go to outside of our school and how we share the information that is learned there and brought back into the school to continue to build on our learning in the school. How we do our hiring process and how we do every element of our school program and functioning is not something that happened overnight. It's something that we've been working really, really, really hard on understanding and looking at data and constantly trying new things and taking risks to see if they will work. So I do, as we sit here talking about the first 15th year of our school, I do want to say that to us, it's this incredibly important continuous process of, with growth come new structures, new tasks, new challenges that we need to figure out and learn about and work hard together to see how they will roll out and work. So it's a never-ending project to lead a school that we all care deeply about and are committed to see work and be around forever. So I thank you for being able to trust us and provide us with the guidance and resources to do the work that we do, that we believe so passionately in. And I do hope that you will consider allowing us to stay in operation for 15 more years and hopefully maybe many, many more after that as well.
Great. Thank you. Before I ask for a motion, what do I get? Did the kids, did you give your mom a thumbs up on tonight? Okay. Awesome. You can get dessert tonight. All right. Can I get a motion on DC Bilingual's 15th year renewal?
I move to approve the charter renewal application of DC Bilingual Public Charter School.
I have a motion and a second. Oh, sorry. Okay. So, a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I have an aye from Ricarda by proxy. Unanimous. You get another 15 years. Congratulations. Congratulations. All right.
Next, we'll have E.L. Haynes, if you could please join us. E.L. Haynes operates 3 campuses, an elementary school that with grades pre-kindergarten through 4th grade, a middle school for students in grades 5 through 8, and a high school with grades 9 through 12. The school has adopted the PMF as its goals. Pursuant to these goals, staff have determined that E.L. Haynes has substantially met its goals and student academic achievement expectations. Staff have determined that the school has not committed a material violation of the law or of its charter, has adhered to generally accepted accounting principles, and has not engaged in a pattern of fiscal mismanagement, and is economically viable. Staff recommend that the board vote to renew the school's charter. The school is here, and now they're going to just briefly introduce themselves and give any opening statement they may have. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, everyone. Push that button.
There we go.
There we go. So good evening. I'm Hillary Derelick. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of E.L. Haynes Public Charter School, and I am fortunate, especially at the late hour, to still be joined by so many of the team. Our board chair, Abigail Smith, is here. Our high school principal, Emily Huber-Stetzer, is here. Phyllis Headland, our Chief Academic Officer, and Vanessa Carlo Miranda, our Chief Operating Officer, is behind me. And then 2 of our team members, Joe Callahan and Amber Schlick, over there. We had a parent of an 8th grade student who was here but couldn't stay all the way till we started speaking, so just want to acknowledge him as well. So I want to start by thanking the staff for recommending that we renew, that you vote to renew our charter for another 15 years without any conditions. We are incredibly proud of the school community that we have built, and today are excited to share some of our reflections and hear questions from the board. I want to thank again all of our members of our staff community and family community for being here. Kevin Waller, who had to leave, is the father of 2 8th grade twins in our middle school, and they've been with us since kindergarten. So as a pre-K through 12 school community serving more than 1,100 students, we relentlessly strive to improve. Our first 15 years taught us many lessons, and we are confident that our students will continue to succeed on their path to and through college. In preparing for today, we reflected on how our community has grown and evolved in ways that may not be represented in your report. So I want to spend a little bit of time highlighting those. First, our students continue to grow academically and engage in increasingly more rigorous curriculum to prepare them for college. Over the last 5 years, we've made significant adjustments to more effectively vertically align our curriculum across our pre-K through 12 school, including broadening course offerings, adding more advanced placement courses at our high school, our two newest being environmental science and Spanish, deepening our focus on SAT prep, and providing opportunities for individualized, differentiated, and small group instruction. Because many of our students are English learners and/or receive special education services, we regularly evaluate our supports to ensure all of our students have the best education possible. Second, our students learn about and strive to combat injustices and inequities in our community and beyond. We invested substantial time, energy, and resources to build a school culture grounded in restorative practices in our community. Our students learn how to improve and repair relationships and practice positive social skills in ways that are developmentally appropriate at each campus. And during this school year, we added a peer court program at our high school. We provide learning opportunities for our students outside of the classroom to explore history and their identities. Over the last 5 years, our high school students have participated in and co-led our Civil Rights Tour of the South. Building upon the success of our international service partnerships at the high school, our first group of middle school students traveled to Costa Rica last summer, and another group will travel to Colombia this summer. We also want to highlight that we significantly reduced the number of students suspended since we moved to this new approach to our school culture. Our biggest improvement has been at our high school, with only 1.8% of our high school students suspended so far this school year, down from 20% in 2016. We are proud that this significant reduction in suspensions means our students are in school more and able to capitalize on these incredible opportunities. Third, our students are creative and empowered to explore new opportunities to stretch their abilities outside of the classroom. We deepened our commitment to extracurricular activities and athletics. We have grown a robust and collaborative arts program over the last 5 years, which includes music, visual arts, theater, and dance curriculum across all three campuses. Students also have more access to athletics with new sports teams, including volleyball and girls lacrosse, and more time outside improved by access to our high-quality facilities. Our soccer field is new over the last 5 years, a modernized gym, and playground improvements for our elementary school students as well. And at the elementary school, we launched after-school clubs. Our middle school students shone at the National History Day competition, the DC-wide science fair, and the Washington Urban Debate League competition. And our high school students continue to participate in more college prep programs every year. Lastly, we want to highlight that our students and our families can depend on us, and they consistently choose us. We have high re-enrollment rates at all 3 of our campuses and have a waiting list of nearly 1,000 students. As a community schools partner with Mary's Center, we provide a robust wellness program that supports our students' emotional and physical well-being. We have full-time school counselors, as well as clinicians at all 3 campuses, in addition to our new elementary school therapy dog, Scout. Since our founding, we've also maintained incredibly strong financials with clean audits every year. Each day, we strive to fulfill our mission of ensuring that all of our students, no matter their race, socioeconomic status, or home language, are prepared to succeed in the college of their choice, and that each of them will develop the skills needed to be successful individuals, active community members, and responsible citizens. Thank you, and we look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you. I know that the last week has been a hard week at the school, and I'd be remiss if I didn't both offer our support, as I think many of us have, given the incident last week, but you may be limited in what you can say, but if we could just have an update on the school community, the students involved.
Yeah, so we really deeply appreciate all of the support we received from the charter school community and from the city as a whole. And thank you for your text message the day of the incident. I just am really happy to tell you all that our student is home, the injured student is home and healing at home currently, and we are supporting both our students and their families through the next steps in this process. We have also spent a lot of time with our school community already, listening to what they need to feel safe. We had a family meeting the day after the incident. We've hosted conversations with staff and with students, and we're launching continued opportunities to do so over the next few weeks. We've also, in the interim, put in some security measures. We've had daily bag checks with security wands at the high school, just to make sure that in the interim, while we're figuring out possible longer-term solutions, that everyone has what they need to feel safe.
Anything to add from the board perspective?
I would just say that we, as a board, we actually had a board meeting this week, just coincidentally, just right after the incident. And as a board, we have really appreciated the degree to which, one, the school community immediately responded to support all of the students, including the student who was the perpetrator, and that's something that is important to us as well, to ensure that that student and family is getting the support that they need, and to the degree to which the administration reached out to all of our families, not just at our high school, but to keep both our middle school and elementary school families in the loop so that everybody knew what was going on and had all of the information that is appropriate and that we're able to share with the full school community.
I just also want to recognize Emily Huber-Stetzer, our high school principal. The high school leadership team did an exceptional job responding quickly and providing basically round-the-clock support to our staff and students and families over the last week.
Thank you. All right. Board members? Or Scott?
Can you talk about, you talked in your introduction about how you've expanded extracurricular activities, expanded theater arts and drama and music, and can you talk more about that? I'm interested in, and what you see as the effect on the school community.
I think we've invested a lot in all four of the things you mentioned, Scott. Arts, drama, music, and dance in the last couple of years. And I would say that there are a couple benefits. I mean, I don't need, you guys don't need me to tell you the research that shows the importance of the arts and the impact on student learning. But what I would share that's less, and I do attribute our increases in academic performance to, at least in part, to those investments in students, mostly because of their engagement in school. Because it gives them something to, that they're excited about when maybe that day they're not as excited about math, for example. But the benefit that I think is not as direct as that is the benefit it's bringing to our pre-K through 12 school community. So through our many of our family events and through the performances that come from these different arts programs, we bring all of our schools together. I mean, we had a winter celebration that included students performing dance and singing from all three campuses, and that really helps us bring to life and realize the vision of the pre-K through 12 community that was started in 2004, 15 years ago.
I first came to know about your school because of its commitment to diversity, both racial diversity, socioeconomic, all kinds of diversity. So we'd just love to hear what that commitment has looked like and how your demographics have changed around your neighborhood over the years. Some demographics in your school have changed, and so we'd just like to hear how you've remained committed to that goal and what steps the school's taken to preserve that very crucial factor.
Yeah. So I think our numbers speak for themselves. I think our school continues to be an incredibly diverse school community at every definition of diversity as you raised. There's sort of the way we think about it is twofold. One, how are we preparing our students and our staff to engage in a diverse community, and that includes foundational staff training and support to talk about issues of race and equity. There's a 2-day foundational seminar for all of our staff members that where we explore what it is to be who we are and what that means for the students and the families that we're serving. And I think we have a strong commitment to re-enrolling and keeping the families that we have, and that has been the focus of maintaining our diversity and using our families to help us recruit our new families.
So your re-enrollment rate is really high. I was first thinking when you described these additional extracurricular programs and the benefit of kind of increasing connectivity that it would increase re-enrollment, but I don't know if you can do that at
this point. But I'm curious at this point, do you know how many students started at, what's the full lifespan of students who've started and completed?
So I think it was, I'm looking at Abby, last year was the first graduating class where someone could have been their entire school community, a school educational experience at E.L. Haynes. And I think we only had a handful, maybe somewhere in the 5 to 10 range of the graduating class of about 100 that had been there all the way through. I also want to just take a minute to remind you all that E.L. Haynes also grows at 2 points intentionally. So from 5th to 6th grade, we grow from 50 to 100 students. And from 8th to 9th grade, we grow from about 100 students to about 135 students. So not only do we accept new students at every grade level, but we also intentionally grow at 2 different points to ensure that we are serving the public community as a whole.
So looking at the performance across the full lifespan of schools and having visited, God, now almost a year ago, so it's time to come back again. I know you were talking about some of the changes at the middle school, which is where we might see a little hiccup in performance. I'd just love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I want to start again by saying that we are acutely aware of the performance at all of our schools and all of our grade levels. And the 2 things I'd highlight for the middle school specifically, we have seen increased teacher turnover the last couple of years, which we are focused on in terms of retaining our great staff that are there this year, and on thinking through supports for new teachers, because that has meant newer teachers coming into the school. And we've also really doubled down on I talked about the aligned curriculum that is still relatively new to our school community, and additional supports for our middle school in the implementation of that curriculum. The other thing that I'll add is that we've instituted this year to give the middle school additional supports. We're now working with Achievement Network to give our teachers more real-time information about how students are progressing along the standards over the course of the year, which has already proved really fruitful from even the first to the second administration this school year. And I think you all know this, but we also have a new leadership team in place at the middle school that we are confident in will continue to see improvement. The one thing I want to highlight, despite the decline in the tier number, is that we did see some pretty significant improvements in our PARCC proficiency in our ELA scores at the middle school this past year. And we expect those to continue.
Don, any questions?
I do have one question. Congratulations on all that you've achieved and accomplished. I'd like to ask a question about your board. In all of my experience, your board has really set a very high bar in the city in lots of areas. Efficacy, diversity, engagement, being through a robust committee structure, really diving into the business of the school, and really keeping the business of the school in front of the community of the school very effectively. And I wonder if your board chair or your team just might share some thoughts that might be helpful and beneficial to other schools in terms of how you're able to keep your board functioning at such a high and robust level for so long.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we do have a fantastic board. I, in addition to being board chair, have the pleasure of having been an E.L. Haynes parent for 11 years. And many of our board members either currently or previously have had kids at the school. So one thing that I think we really do is we're very committed to connecting the school community and the parent experience with the board leadership. And I think that's part of what has proven successful. One of the things that as a board chair, I appreciate the nod in terms of our board effectiveness. Working with an executive director or a CEO like Hillary makes the board work so easy, because the level of transparency with which our CEO approaches the work with the board, and I know that you all heard a lot about transparency tonight. Our board meetings are all open to anyone who wants to be there. We encourage people to have some visibility into what's happening, and our CEO provides incredible visibility for the board, so that makes our committee experiences really real. We're delving into real challenges on our school performance committee. Our board members are very involved in looking at our financial issues and things like loan covenants. Our board members get down and dirty with those issues, and that is a huge testament to the staff team and the degree to which they are really open to that level of support. So I would say it really is a two-way street there.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Anyone?
I move to approve the charter renewal application of E.L. Haynes Public Charter School.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. An aye from Don and an aye from Ricarda as well. It's unanimous. Congratulations. Really great work. More work to be done. We appreciate the plans in place. We appreciate the conversation about the board. And again, appreciate the way I think the community's come together around the incident of the last week. And please reach out if there's anything more that we can do in support of that and anything else. But
we also like to say we really appreciate, we know that the job you all have is the most absurd volunteer job in terms of the amount of time you put in, and it does not go unnoticed. So thank you for that.
thank you.
Our last school is going to be Two Rivers.
Who I'll bet wish they had called themselves Acme Charter Schools.
A Two Rivers.
Two Rivers operates two campuses, a school serving PK3 through 8 and another currently offering PK3 through 4. The school has elected the PMF as its goals, in addition to a mission-specific goal regarding its expeditionary learning program. Pursuant to these goals, staff has determined that Two Rivers has met its goals and student academic achievement expectations at both campuses. Staff have determined that the school has not committed a material violation of the law, has adhered to generally accepted accounting principles, has not engaged in fiscal mismanagement, and is economically viable. Staff recommend that the board vote to renew the school's charter. The school is here to make their opening statement and respond to any questions you may have.
Jessica Wodach. I'm the executive director and one of the founders of Two Rivers. I'm also a native Washingtonian and went to public schools pre-K-12. My board members introduce themselves.
Hi, Ali Khauer. I'm the board secretary.
Clara Haskell-Botstein, board chair.
So thank you guys so much for having us. We are very humbled and excited to be here after 15 years. This school started as the dream, a little twinkle in the eye of 36 parents in DC. And we worked very hard to make it happen, and then have worked all the way since with an amazing staff and a great community of families and supporters to realize our dream. As you guys know, we are really committed to a very specific mission. We really believe in education that centers on experiences, and we use EL education to help us realize that. We believe in social emotional learning, in making sure that all of our kids have a well-rounded education and have arts and a second language and PE. And we also want that to be done in a diverse and welcoming environment. And that's what we were founded on, and that's what we've stood by for many years. I know that you have a 40-page document that outlines the many things about us, so I don't need to tell you too much, but I will just say that we are really pleased with the results that we've been able to get over 15 years. We also are dreamers and are never happy until it's excellent, and so we have lots of places that we feel like are really strong, and then some places that we are continuing to work to get better and better so that our outcomes are awesome for all of our kids all the time. We do have one of the longest waiting lists in Washington, D.C., and have for many, many years, which caused us to grow several years ago. And so now we operate 2 elementary schools and a middle school. We have many alums that are out in the world doing well, from serving in the military to attending Georgetown University to attending Rhode Island School of Design. Most recently, one of our founding alums came back. She's in college at Trinity Washington University to volunteer her time on a regular basis with our little ones, which is like the dream come true, as all of us educators know. And we just have a really vibrant learning community that celebrates learning. I know at least half of you up there have been to Two Rivers and seen our Mathemagical Wizard at community meeting, or seen our kids doing really engaging projects, or our parents there to see them in action. I invite you all to come back at any time, and we're excited to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Board members. Steve?
So I really like your school, and I think you have,
Thanks.
if not the best, certainly one of the best EL models in the city. I'm curious to know what you all have learned over the past few years from opening another campus. What have the lessons been?
Well, it's almost 9. So I know you don't want to hear all my lessons, right? That's what happens when you're last. Okay, I'll give you a few of the lessons. So I think, we were lucky. We waited for quite a long time to expand. We did not want to expand until we felt really convinced that our model worked for all kids. And so we gave it the time we needed to make sure we were ready. And then our board gave us enough time to really prepare. So we actually voted as a board in 2013 to open, and opened in 2015. In that time, I interviewed anyone who would talk to me who'd done an expansion. And so I think in a lot of ways we were set up by the wisdom of other networks, and who told us lots of important things. I think one of the most important was to be really clear what decisions principals could make versus what decisions people at the network level were going to make. So we wrote that all down very clearly and communicated it and worked on it with our teams. We also engaged in change management. We started as a very tiny school, and this change was supported by our staff, in part because we wanted to bring the mission to more kids. But it's also hard. We were really clear with our staff that we were going to move some people in order to make sure that our new campus would start strong. And so when you've been partnering with someone for 8 years and all of a sudden they're headed 2 miles down the road, that's tough. So we really worked on managing those feelings and emotions and accepting that some parts were difficult, and we were doing it for the right reasons, which was to be able to serve more kids. I think the thing that we didn't see coming was that it had more of a destabilizing impact on our 4th Street campus, our founding campus, than we expected. We actually opened with a really strong culture at our expansion campus, which was really wonderful. We'd been able to incubate a leader. He actually started as a founding assistant teacher at Two Rivers and grew up to become a principal. And so he was able to open that campus with just a really strong culture. But I think because we had done a lot of moving and gotten really, really large, that was probably one of the more unforeseen parts, was that the first campus we had started felt those growing pains in a way we didn't really predict. Anything you guys want to add?
So congratulations. And I'm curious, as you have evolved and matured your model and had the good problem to have where you've got students who may have started with you when a broad expanse of kids whose needs you're meeting, who may have, you've got a lot of at-risk students, but also students who may be knocking out of the park academically. How have you addressed the challenge of meeting the needs of a very diverse student body?
So thanks for that question. I think that any teacher at Two Rivers, and probably any teacher in the city, would tell you that making sure you're differentiating for all the kids in your class is the hardest thing you have to do. And so I think we have a number of strategies that we feel really good at, but we would also say that that's a place we continue to learn. We picked a model that we felt would allow for students at any different spot in learning and growing to have places for success and places for challenge. And so I think part of what expeditions do, our model of EL education is built around 2 expeditions each year. One comes out of science and one's out of social studies, the standards. They're 8 to 10 week long in-depth investigations where students are answering a compelling problem. So for example, in 8th grade, our students one year were asked, who owns my DNA and under what circumstances would I share it? And they learned about genetics and ethics. They read about Henrietta Lacks, and they ultimately wrote a trial and put Johns Hopkins on trial. and really just produce this compelling question about who owns your DNA. And so I think that getting an opportunity to engage like that means, first of all, that all kids are interested because they're doing something meaningful and relevant. And that's one of the reasons our school was founded, because we really believe learning is super fun. And that if schools do what they should to capture it, then they'll be really wonderful and vibrant places. But what that also means is that if you're writing a court case, a trial, or if you're writing pitches, they can be 2 pages long or they can be 2 paragraphs long, and they can be whatever is needed from your teacher to push you to do your best work. Of course, we have standards for all of our students at each grade level, but it also just gives us an opportunity to do that. Another expedition we did a while back was looking at public space and the use of public space, and our students created plans for a parcel near 2 rivers and pitched it to the NOMA bid folks. One of the students who excelled the most and was selected by his peers to present was a student with special needs who was fascinated by this particular topic and turned out to be a really amazing public speaker, even though reading was not his strong suit. And so I think the model allows us to let all kids shine. You probably know from looking at the documents that we serve a very high percentage of students with special needs, up to 20% to sometimes a third in some of our grades of our students have IEPs. And so the model really does need to be responsive to all kids.
I got the chance to see your school and saw one of the expeditions. I think it was around why do some kids have more books than others, which was just fantastic to see. So congratulations on that work.
Thanks.
Did want to ask how the challenge of matching those expeditions and the skills kids are getting to the park and standardized testing, and how, I mean, I'm sure the scores are not quite where you expected them to be for your 3rd graders at Young, so just would like to hear if that was surprising and how you've responded to that finding.
Yes. So I think there were a couple questions in there, but we weren't surprised by our 3rd graders' scores. We were disappointed in them, but I also just want to say about the PMF, and you know this, and I appreciate that it was highlighted in the report, thanks to the staff for really working on getting a complex understanding of everything, that our 2 PMF scores for last year and this year, or for last year and the year before, are really apples to oranges, because this year we include park scores and last year we didn't. And so I think it looks like a very strong dip, and it is a dip, but it isn't comparing kids on the same tests. And as you guys know, 25% of our park or our PMF for Young is based on park scores, which for us last year was about 45 students. That said, we knew before, when we were looking at our own internal data, that we needed to do a little bit more work, not just with those students, but with a number of our students at Young, and we put a number of things in place. So we have had a change in leadership, which was not brought about because of that, but always gives a chance for new kind of growth and excitement. We have an additional coach. We have some additional support people. And we really started off by making sure that our environment was nice and strong. Scott got a chance to come earlier this year and walk through and kind of feel the positive learning environment that it is. The other thing that I think is notable is we wrote a grant and have been able to add 5 co-taught special ed, general ed classrooms as a pilot. And so 4 of those classrooms we selected at Young in those upper grades that we felt like needed extra attention and had a higher percentage of students with special needs. So that's another thing that we've done just to make sure that there's lots of support in the classroom every single day so that kids can really be excelling. Anything I'm forgetting?
One question for me is, of the 3 schools this evening, we have one school that feeds into DCI along with a number of other bilingual schools. We have one school that's created its own feeder, and you guys ended 8th grade. If you can share a little bit about the experience of students, not just where they go, but you mentioned where they go on to college and other things, but as you think about the high school ecosystem in particular.
Sure. So I think that getting into high school in DC is one of the most challenging things that families face. There aren't a lot of options, and it's very difficult. It's especially difficult if you're not a high-performing student. So one of the things we found early on is that we had to build supports for our students in selecting high schools, and we really focus on getting them into a best fit high school. So we've had one full-time person for a long time working on that with our students. They do what we call My High School Search. It starts actually in 7th grade, and students are thinking about what kind of learner am I, what kind of school is going to be my best fit, what's important to me. We bring families in. When I was a parent going through this process, I can't remember if I said that I have 2 alums of the school and 1 current middle schooler at Two Rivers. But when my first son was going through the process, we went to My High School Search night. I was there as a parent, and they were working on their essays, and I couldn't get my son to work on his essay, but when his teacher's right there telling him to work on his essay, and you're there as a parent and student team, it really helps. And so we have a lot of events that support families in both selecting high schools and then getting ready to apply, whether that's auditioning for something at Duke Ellington or interviewing for the new Bard Early College, which we're very excited about. So all of those things are in place. We've recently added an additional investment, which is to follow our students in 9th grade. We had a grant a while ago and learned from DC Prep. DC Prep's had a very long-standing program to provide those kinds of services. And so we have a staff member who goes to every school that we have 9th graders at to make sure that they're doing well. We've partnered through the Raise DC work to make sure that we can get their scores, their attendance, any kind of disciplinary information. So we track our kiddos. One of the things we found and research shows is that staying in the same school from 9th to 10th grade is a very strong indicator of success. So we're working hard to make sure that they do that. Just quickly, about more than half of our kids go to the DCPS application in schools. So that's School Without Walls, Banneker, McKinley Tech, and what am I forgetting? Ellington, right, Duke. And given the year, different numbers of kids go there, but we have very large percentages at those schools. And then we have students at private schools, at local DC public schools, and also at charters. Does that answer your question?
Is it a follow-up to that? Go ahead.
By any chance, do you track how many of your graduates' families end up having to elect to leave DC because they don't feel like they have good high school options?
I could look at that. I would say offhand that I don't think that's a very high number. I think also not every family has those opportunities to move, and so a lot of times we're just looking for what's the best choice option. I've talked with almost every high school leader in the city to try and get them to either create a partnership with me or open more slots. We've talked to providers like you guys from other cities to try and get them to come here, because it really is a challenge. And I would say all of our top performing students are going to get into a high school that's going to do well by them. But we have lots of students who struggle and need extra support. And even if they are finishing on grade level, they need extra additional support. And so those are the students who we are most in need of high schools who will serve well.
Thank you. I just recently visited, so some of the questions I already had in my notes. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I would love for you to quickly just run through would be your professional development. I know we talked about some of the work that you all have done in that space and how it's not only benefited the teachers on staff, but how you're working with the sector overall.
Great, thanks. Yes, so when we expanded when our board voted to expand in 2013, they voted both to add additional seats in the city, but also to try and increase our impact in other ways, which has mainly been through professional development. One of the things we really believe is that all of us at Two Rivers are learners and we're all leaders. And so we try to create opportunities for our teachers to lead. One of our favorite events is coming up in March. You're all invited. It's our Evening of Learning seminars, where we have teachers that share workshops for other teachers. It started many years ago as just Two Rivers teachers, but now we do an RFP. And we've had teachers from DC public schools and charter schools and private schools all come and share. It's just a night of learning from one another. We've really we've gotten several OSCE best practices grants that have allowed us to build out a best practice website called Learn with Two Rivers. And if you go on Learn with Two Rivers, there are multiple videos and documents that would allow you to implement some of the things that we're doing yourself. So we are really passionate about what we do in our school, and we want other people to do it too. And I think there are lots of baby steps and grand steps that you can take to do it. And so if you wanted to figure out how to make your arts more integrated, you could go and see videos and get lesson plans. Or if you wanted to think about critical thinking in math, or if you wanted to, we have another separate grant to do some assessments in deeper learning, where we've worked actually to develop assessments that are now being used around the city and in other places across the country to measure whether our students' critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills are strong. So that's some of the work that we're doing, and we feel like that is a value add to others, but also to us, because it gives us, we have a long-standing math professional development called Learning and Loving Math, and we run that for other people, but all our new teachers go through it as well. So it's a way that we feel like we can give back, but also continue to positively impact what we do, and our teachers help co-lead that. And then we also do PD just for our own staff. We have an early dismissal on Wednesdays for our elementary school, and we bring in a partner to serve our middle school kids doing health education and physical education during that time. And so from 2 to 5 every Wednesday, we're doing professional development with our own staff. And I'll talk your ears off about all that, but I should probably stop.
And I would just add, thank you for having us. We were a lucky recipient of a 2-year grant from Compass, which provides pro bono consulting services. So we're actually engaging in a strategic planning process to kind of strengthen our impact for the students we serve and within the community. And so one of the areas we're looking at is precisely what you asked about. So professional development, mentorship of EL schools, et cetera. So we look forward to being able to share those results hopefully with you.
And I did forget to add, I know Karen mentioned earlier that they're a mentor school for EL education. We are as well, a national mentor school. One of the things that means is that we are housing a local leader who, I guess her charter's not approved yet, but who's writing a charter that I think is in a good path, but so would potentially be a leader here in DC of a new charter school next year. And so she's serving a mentorship year learning at Two Rivers.
What was the verdict in the Johns Hopkins Henrietta Lacks trial?
I'm so glad you asked that. So the fun thing about that was that everybody in the audience had to vote. And I was the last person there because my second son, who at the time was probably 10, could not decide. They offered such compelling evidence. So I will say every year we do some version of that expedition, and generally people feel very strongly that, of course, no one should take people's DNA without their agreement, but they do see the advantage of sharing.
Don, any questions or remarks? Otherwise, we'll go to a motion.
No, thanks. Only just to express my admiration and appreciation.
Excellent.
Thanks, Don.
All right. If I can get a motion.
I move to approve the charter renewal application for Two Rivers Public Charter School.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I got an aye from Don and an aye from Ricarda. So be it. Unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you. All right. Hannah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Cousineau, Senior Specialist on the Equity and Fidelity team. Staff recommends that the board vote to approve the revised special education audit policy. The proposed changes update the criteria the DC Public Charter School Board will review and the procedures it will initiate for schools that may not be in compliance with all laws pertaining to students with disabilities. We received 4 public comments on the revised policy. All public comments have been addressed in Attachment C in the board materials, and many of the suggestions have been incorporated into the policy.
Maybe you can share what precipitated the revision of the policy.
Sure. So the policy was developed in 2013, which is many years ago in the life of the data that we collect and the procedures that we initiate in response to an instance of concern. So one of the reasons we wanted to update it was to incorporate some data that we now have access to that we used to not. Another reason is to align the policy with some of our other policies, including the data and document submission policy, the data audit policy, and the English learner monitoring policy, as well as the community complaints policy.
Thank you.
And I should say that some of the responses and changes that we made due to some community comment that we received was really to make it quite clear what is our process when we come across an instance of concern. So not only are the criteria much clearer that schools can meet, I think the response mechanisms that will initiate are clearer as well.
Yeah, and I'll say thank you on behalf of the board for making it so clear, both in terms of what the new process is, or the new parts of the policy, but also where the changes are. So.
Thank you.
Board members, any questions on this?
I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. The criteria on discipline, is it that it's a change to now say that an audit will be triggered when there's higher out-of-school suspensions and expulsions?
Those triggers have always been part of the policy. We rewarded them just for some ease of reading and, frankly, for some parallel structure.
Okay.
Grammar wins.
Always. I can go through some newer criteria if you wanted that at all, or.
Any questions? Don, any questions?
No.
Great. I think it's pretty straightforward and clarifies what many of the things that have been in place and that we're updating. So if there are no other questions, I'll seek a motion.
I move to approve the revisions to the special education audit policy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye from Don, and an aye from Ricarda Ganjum on her proxy as well. Thank you, Hannah. All right. As many people who watch us monthly know, in December, we voted to begin the revocation process for Democracy Prep Congress Heights Public Charter School, and it is their right to request a hearing or to relinquish their charter. I'm going to read into record a statement from or a statement about Democracy Prep. So the DC Public Charter School Board requests to submit into the record the official charter relinquishment of Democracy Prep Congress Heights Public Charter School. DC Public Charter School Board staff conducted a charter review of Democracy Prep PCS according to the standard required by the School Reform Act. And on December 17th, 2018, our board voted to initiate charter revocation of the school. On January 3rd, 2019, Democracy Prep's board chair, Antonio Williams, notified the DC Public Charter School Board that the Democracy Prep Board of Trustees would not request a hearing and will instead relinquish its charter on June 30, 2019. Our staff has already begun working with students and families to ensure that every student is enrolled in a quality school for next school year. And as part of our monitoring of the closure process, staff will coordinate with the school to ensure a smooth wind down of its operations. So that is now read into record. All right, getting to the close of our meeting. We've got matters to be read into record for our consent calendar, and these tend to be non-controversial items, as you see listed here, that we can move forward with. Before we vote on the consent calendar, just want to ask if any board member would like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion, or if we have any need to state a recusal for the record. Don? Anything? Nope. All right. And I do not have anything from Ricarda. All right. I will take a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar.
I move to approve all items on the consent calendar.
Second.
All right. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. An aye from Don Soifer, and an aye from Ricardo Ganjum. So that motion passes. All right. Any new business, board members? Okay. If there is no new business, we'll open the floor for public comment one last time. Would anyone like to speak this evening before we adjourn? All right. If I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the January 28th, 2019 board meeting.
All right. Good. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Don? Don, do I get an aye? Oh, aye. All right. Very good. Motion passes. The meeting is adjourned. We'll see everyone back here in February at our regular monthly board meeting. Thank you.